As part of our growth as a Christian, we are on a journey growing to have the heart of Jesus. The Bible often speaks about growth and development. As believers, we move from milk to meat, maturing from receivers of simple truths to teachers of the Word. Paul regularly prays for the church to grow in wisdom and understanding so that they can bear fruit. Is there a sense or order to our development as Christ followers? The critical journey describes 6 stages on this journey of faith. A few important notes about these stages. Stage model theory is descriptive rather than prescriptive. It helps describe what takes place. It is not prescribing how to move on. The authors encourage us to look at our own lives. We experience childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, middle age, older adulthood, and senior citizen status. Each stage builds developmentally on the previous experience, but we are not inherently better people as adults than we were as children. Therefore, the stages are not to be seen as one inherently better than another. These stages cannot be skipped over. There are no shortcuts. It's a process, though certain stages can be revisited in new seasons at a different level. We can't get stuck at any of these stages on our journey. For those who feel they have moved on, it is important to remember that the earlier stages were vital. They cannot be denied to other people. We need all the stages of faith for full spiritual formation. We can intellectually grasp the stage immediately ahead, but not truly comprehend the stage that is 2 stages further along than our own. Therefore, those at later stages will often be misunderstood by those at earlier stages. Likewise, those at later stages will be tempted to look down upon those at earlier stages. The greatest challenge is to continue to progress in our faith. In the first 3 stages, our faith or our spirituality takes its expression most frequently in ways that are prescribed by external standards, whether by the church, a specific spiritual leader, a book, or a set of principles. Stages 4 to 6 represent a difficult personal transformation or inner work that requires a rediscovery on a different level of what faith and spirituality is all about. Stage 1 humbles us. Stage 2 grounds us. Stage 3 rewards us. Stage 4 unsettles us. The wall unmasks us. Stage 5 transforms us. Stage 6 transcends us. As you read through them, try to identify, without judgment, where you currently are in your journey with God. Stage 1, recognition of God. This is where we all begin on the journey of faith. We may experience it as children or as adults. This is a time of discovery and accepting the reality of God's presence in our lives. This stage is characterized by a sense of awe, also a sense of innocence and freshness. There is a natural awareness of God, a sense of our need of Him, and also an experience of greater meaning and purpose for our lives. This stage reminds us of the awesome power of God and the finiteness of our lives. How can we become caged at this stage? We stick to worthlessness. How do we move on to the next stage? become part of a small group, follow a leader that gives direction. Stage 2. Life of discipleship. This stage is a time of learning and belonging. We are like apprentices, absorbing as much as we can from people we respect and trust. It's a time of interacting with others on a similar journey. There is often a sense of excitement as a result of belonging to something bigger than ourselves. This stage represents community. It is also often characterized by a sense of rightness. There is a feeling of certainty and security in our faith. We encounter a set of ideas, a belief system, or a group of people who show us the light and answer our questions. It is such a big relief and feels so safe and secure, like a haven in a storm. It gives us what we need. How do we become caged? Become rigid in following rules. Develop a we against them attitude. How do we move on from this stage? Recognize our uniqueness and identify our giftedness. Recognize our opportunity to contribute. Stage 3. Productive life. This is best described as the doing stage. It's a very active phase when we are consciously engaged in working for God. We have become aware of our unique gifts, and we want to put those to use in our community of faith and in the world. Often we take on a specific leadership role or responsibility. There is a sense of productivity and fruitfulness, along with a feeling of having reached a spiritual goal. In the productive life, the truths learned at stage 2 find an outlet in service at stage 3. Evangelical ideas of growth climax at this stage. It assumes that a person is spiritually mature when they are part of the committed core, serving in and through the church according to their gifts. It is, however, possible that people minister for selfish reasons. Church activity is not an indicator of maturity. Busyness in church activities does not automatically lead to spiritual growth. Christian service is not the best determiner of spiritual maturity. Although the productive life is important, it is not the goal. If this happens, the pinnacle of Christian maturity is faithful, committed service. Some evangelical ideas of Christian growth stop here. While it is obvious that a person can arrive at this stage and still be self-serving, legalistic, immature, and inwardly unhealed, some church leaders do not know or understand anything beyond stage 3, and when they witness the struggle of stage 4, they question the person's faith. This results in people leaving the church when they experience stage 4. What causes us to become caged? Overly zealous in our way or weary in well-doing. If we are self-centered, we view life as performance. How do we move to the next stage? Things that we thought worked don't work anymore. We experience a faith or personal crisis that causes the wall. We feel abandoned by God and/or others. We start looking for direction, seek guides. Stage 4. Journey inward. Most of us are so comfortable and self-sufficient at the previous, called a productive or fruitful life, that we have no natural tendency to move on from this stage. Therefore, it usually demands a crisis. In fact, Stage 4 does not even look like part of the journey for those who are at home in Stage 3. It does appear to be an extension of our faith and growth. Consequently, we are not drawn in this direction. This stage is marked by a deep and very personal journey inward. It can feel unsettling at first, and yet can lead to great freedom for those who journey through it. Many of the certainties and securities of previous stages begin to unravel, and we are confronted by doubts and questions that can lead to a crisis of faith. We move from a posture of knowing to one of seeking inner direction for our lives. We are compelled to know ourselves and God more fully. There is more of a personal integrity in our relationship with God. Being becomes important. We can experience pain in discovering that God is not who we previously thought He was. We need to figure out a new way to do this relationship with God and others. The crisis shocks our system. We lose comfort and question our convictions, as our previous faith supports are no longer adequate. The disruption can be so great that we feel like we are losing our faith or betraying loyalties. How do we get caged? If we always question everything, and also when we are consumed by self-assessment, we become immobilized, don't keep moving. How do we move to the next stage? Let go of self-centeredness, accept God's purposes for our lives. Seek wholeness through personal healing and pilgrimage. Be willing to commit to whatever it takes. The wall. The wall belongs to Stage 4. It can also be the transfer to Stage 5. The wall is so critical that it is considered separately. The wall represents our will meeting God's will face to face. We are confronted with the reality of whether we are willing to surrender to God. The wall is a place of wrestling, or dying to self and waiting to be reborn. Going through the wall unmasks us and involves a painful but transformative rediscovery of who God is and who we are. Overwhelmed by pain or crisis in our lives, we can cut ourselves off from God. It is impossible to go over, around, or under the wall. One can only go through it. The wall experience is the place where psychology and spirituality converge. Up to this point, one can be religious, spiritual, or fruitful, and not be in a healing process. Many never have the courage to journey through it. At the wall, we are forced to face the truth in order to move forward. The wall invites us to integrate our spiritual selves with the rest of us, and that involves facing our own and others' demons. We must face that which we fear most. And that is why it's so unsavory, and why so many people only enter the wall under duress. Only through self-acceptance and surrender to God's will can one go through the wall to deeper levels of spiritual growth. The power behind the transformation at the wall is this: learn to embrace your whole story with loving, forgiving detachment. We must accept ourselves with all our wounds and imperfections. We must experience God's love and acceptance of us as we are, in all our weakness and humanness. Then we most fully and completely surrender to God's will, even though we remain in the dark. Through doubts and difficulties, we come to know God and ourselves better. Communicating this stage to others who have not experienced it is difficult. People at stage 1 can't imagine such an experience. Those at stage 2 view it as a lack of conviction. Believers at stage 3 wonder whether we have become heretic. It's hard for those at previous stages to recognize that doubt is not disbelief. Doubt is faith taking itself seriously. Many Christians don't know what to do when people hit the wall. Typical responses can range from encouraging them to read the latest spiritual book, get into a quick fixed workshop, get an accountability partner as soon as possible, or, if it's really bad, go to a counselor to fix what's wrong and get back to normal as soon as you can. An example of the healing and transformation that occurs after the wall is the realization that fixing others, over-helping others, codependency, or excessive enabling of others is not selfless service. These motivations have unhealthy roots. They portray a sense of low self-esteem, a desire to control. There are far more questions than answers. Can be a most confusing stage, but also a most glorious stage, because it is where we begin to let go of some of the comforts that protected us so well, but that also kept us from deeper and richer experiences. How do we get caged at the wall? Resistance at the wall, strong egos, guilt and shame-ridden, intellectuals, high achievers, doctrine-focused, people-pleasers. Going through the wall involves discomfort, surrender, healing, awareness, forgiveness, risk, acceptance, love, closeness to God, discernment, melting, molding, solitude and reflection. The journey outward again, stage 5 and stage 6. Stage 5 is the journey outward, where our focus is outward, but from a new grounded center of ourselves. At this stage, we surrender to God's will to fully direct our lives, but with our eyes wide open, aware but unafraid of the consequences. We possess a newfound confidence that God loves us fully, just as we are. God loves us in our humanness. Aware of our faults, we are confident that God will work through us. This wholeness means being very aware of our faults, but not letting them trip us. God can use us most in our brokenness. A truth that was very hard to accept until the wall experience. It is a heart that is genuinely concerned for the well-being of others. At stage 5, we are not as oriented towards productivity with outward signs or products. Consequently, we appear less productive and slightly isolated and counterculture. We have a tendency to do things behind the scenes or on a one-to-one basis. We are hardly noticed. This style can be frustrating for those who want us to be leaders in the more traditional way. Not really caged at this stage, but others can view you as such. For example, seemingly out of touch with practical concerns, careless about important things, not diligent in certain areas. How do we move to the next stage? Not striving, just evolving, growing deeper, seeing God in all of life, letting go. Stage 6 is the life of love, where God's love is demonstrated through us to others in the world more clearly and consistently than we ever thought possible. By losing ourselves, we find ourselves. God's presence is experienced in all relationships. Our times alone with God come during the quiet times away, as well as in the everyday unceasing conversations. We have little ambition for being well-known, rich, successful, noteworthy, goal-orientated, or spiritual. We are spirit-filled, but in a quiet, unassuming way. We love with great compassion, modeled after God's love. We live with less and delight in menial tasks. At stage 6, we can reach far beyond our own capacity and love our fellow human beings with deep compassion, because we know that all come from and are loved by God. As Jesus was compassionate even in Gethsemane, at his trial, and on the cross, so we are compassionate under extreme hardship. At stage 6, we become aware that the more of God we have, the less of everything else we need. We do not renounce material possession. We simply learn to need them less. We become detached from things and people as props or bolstering devices. We can deliberately give up our lives, materially, physically, mentally, and emotionally for the service of others without feeling afraid of the deep loss. We love without the need to be loved in return. We are not egocentric or self-centered, but theocentric, God-centered, Christocentric, Christ-centered, and eccentric, others-centered. We love others, not for our sake, but for their own sake, not with our goodness in mind, but with their goodness in mind. Having shed the false self, a self rooted in possessions, accomplishments, and human acceptance, we embrace our true self, that of being eternally and fully loved by God. How do you get caged at this stage? Not really caged, but others can view you as separate from the world, neglecting yourself, and that maybe you are wasting your life.